Seventh, he had moral courage. Now, moral courage, in a way, is very rare. It's much rarer than physical courage. General Patton once defined physical courage on the battlefield as fear plus 5 minutes. And moral courage, you have to have it for a long time, because retaliation is for a long time. Think what whistleblowers go through, for example. But he told me a story once in a jocular way, but it really was very impressive. He joined the Army, and the first hours, they took all the recruits through the usual line where they were picking up their clothing, their shoes, their tools, their equipment, their big sack on their back. And as they were all marching through one room after another, they marched through a room where a sergeant was sitting on at a desk, and he was just giving everybody a pen, and he was saying, sign. And it was a statement they had to sign. And Peter said, what's this? You know how he said that? And the sergeant said, sign this, it's a loyalty oath to the U.S. government. And Peter said, that's unconstitutional. And the sergeant said, what did you say? And he said, that violates my constitutional rights of free speech. I'm not going to sign it. The sergeant said, would you step aside, please? There's someone that wants to talk with you. And they drummed him out of the Army, even though he wanted to stay in. There aren't many people who would do that. What was he? A late teenager at the time. So he paid a price for his moral courage in many ways. But he was very courageous in his illness. All the hours I spoke to him on the phone, he never demonstrated any self-pity. The last time Matt and I called him, which was probably September 10th or so, we got him on the phone, and he said, in a irregular voice, he said, I can't talk to you guys now. I'll talk to you later. Those were his last words to us. But that's the only slight shudder that I saw him express. And can you imagine the condition he was in, even to say that? He was also resilient. Not many people can engage in that many struggles for justice, and you heard a whole number of them just now, and still keep coming back, and still keep coming back, and still keep coming back with a good attitude and fervor and learning as he goes. Resiliency is one of the rarest traits in a full-time public citizen's career, as we all know, because you wouldn't be here if you weren't active citizens. Ninth, he had a grounded public philosophy. That's very important. He knew who he was, where he came from, where he wanted to go. He was not a windmill, although he loved wind power. He had a compass, and that always impressed me, because that way he could receive a lot of information daily, and it fit in his public philosophy. And his public philosophy was not an ideology. It was not dogmatic. It was a broad framework of what's fair and what's just, given different situations. And of course, he had a very deep sense of injustice. The jurisprudence professor at NYU many years ago, Edmund Kahn, once said, you cannot have a sense of justice without having a sense of injustice. And he had a very cultivated sense of injustice. And finally, he used his capital. A lot of people don't like to use their influence or their moral capital. And he demonstrated that at the Peace and Freedom Convention about 10 days before he passed away. When he came down with his head shaven, and he was clearly going through chemotherapy hell. And I looked at his eyes when he was sitting in the audience, and it was like nothing was wrong. He was interested, alert, and then he got up and he made a case for Matt and I getting on the Peace and Freedom ballot. And those of you who were there must have known what he was made of. And he really didn't have to do that. Physically, he didn't have to do that. And he, I'm sure, upset some of his friends who supported other candidates. But he took a stand. That's what Peter was all about. He took a stand. He would have agreed with Marcus Cicero's definition of freedom. Marcus Cicero defined freedom as participation in power. And that's what he was all about, just power, shifting power, recognizing that the concentration of power and greed and control in the hands of the few are the greatest sources of injustice and deprivation and undermining the future for our children and grandchildren. Well, to say that we're going to miss Peter is to engage in a cliche, but I hope through his biography, his legacy will continue in his own words, and I hope through his other books, people will read his revision of history in a more accurate way compared to the way it's taught us. And I hope that by what we continue doing in his spirit and with his example, wherever he is today, he will say to us, I miss you all too.